Well, welcome back. I want to come to you. I mean, you were talking about sort of forms of profit sharing and a more participative approach to the economy. But what would you do as a response to Ketse Gordon? Would you say that's part of the way that we need to think about some
Firstly,
ratios?
I think it's commendable what he has done, but it should not be a pacifying thing. It should be a real commitment as a strategy of the company to seek to reduce executive pay in order to uplift the low-earning workers.
Can I just ask you this? Would you be worried about the fact of people escaping? We often hear the fact that if we don't reward people generously, they'll go to other, in a global world, labor is mobile. And in fact, one of the big problems about labor migration is the brain drain from developing countries to developed countries.
Oh, well, that has always been happening, but I think it's a scarecrow. It doesn't really happen. I think we just need a concrete...
But it has happened. We've had lots of people. I mean, look how many doctors and economists and lawyers and accountants live in America and Australia.
Those are... It's also related to the colonial nature of our economy, that somehow the imperial countries continue to draw skills from developing countries, and I think it's happening all over the world. But obviously, when they go to those particular areas, they earn better and so forth, and they come back. Sometimes some of them do come back and spend a lot. I mean, there's been recent research, for instance, of people in Uganda, a group of former expatriates, Ugandan expatriates in Europe, who are coming back and contributing greatly to the development of their country. It's happening in many other parts of the world, but in real times, it shouldn't be. It is being used as a scarecrow by various companies. I think ideally, this gap must be reduced to at least not more than 10.
10.
Yeah.
And who are you then going to get to do the job?
You'll get many great,
really?
competent executives who will do
But
the
if you
job.
had 10,
they'll live comfortably and so forth.
Assuming that you were paying somebody 12,500 rands, is what the lowest platinum workers want, correct? Mm-hmm. That's about about 150,000 rands a year. So you saying 10, 1.5 million.
That should be the maximum. It should be capped, actually. That's
and do you think that if it was that we would get the kind of expertise required to run complex organizations?
We've always had them.
But not at that pay.
No, I mean, for instance, if you look at the various executives in Europe, in France, even in Britain, the pay, the gap is not as much as it is.
It's not 10.
Yeah, but it's not 10. But it's not as huge as it is.
All
here.
right.
So they still retain the people there. The issue is whether people can accept to live better in their own country and
okay,
serve.
fair enough.
I'll tell you what our problem is we're trying to actually cap success. We want to actually bring people's wages down, whereas I think we need to be looking how to raise wages. We're also making the mistake of, in the platinum miners, if we get 12,500, why on earth would the miners want to employ somebody unskilled when that's actually starting to get the level of skilled level worker, which means that you're starting to get a gap between how do you even enter the economy. So we need to actually have entry-level jobs so that people can enter. And that means a lower wage, but if people stay on that level, that is a problem. In other words, that you need entry levels so that people can make the upward migration, but that upward migration must happen.
But how low is that low level?
Well, it's
and particularly in a country which has this level of inequality.
Well,
Roger Southall is suggesting that you're going to have serious, and I think he's right, Piketty warns about that too, serious political instability.
Yes, the biggest cause of inequality in this country is unemployment. That's the biggest cause of it. And one of the problems is how do you actually enter the economy when you actually haven't had an education system that has worked?
You wanted to say something about that, I thought.
Yes, I think Chris is right on the fact that our biggest problem is unemployment over and above the pay gap, not undermining the importance of having a sustainable kind of pay system within our corporations. I think that if we solve unemployment, and one of the ways of solving unemployment is by making it easier for young people who want to get into the labor force to actually access that. And if we keep the cost from an economic point of view, cost of entry very high, then companies would go to alternatives.
Let's debate that for a second. When you say very high, what do you mean? Again, in a country like, is that what some sort of free labour market dictates, or are we prepared to say in a country like this there is a certain minimum wage that people, below which people shouldn't get? I mean, it's even a debate now in the United States of America.
Well, I think that's a very difficult question to ask, because we're in a much more comfortable position, and I don't want to say to somebody, I would rather you stay unemployed than accept a wage of this.
All right, okay. Is that what you say? What do you say about that?
The minimum wage debate is a very difficult one.
No, but what's being suggested here is that the argument is fair enough. Biggest problem we've got is unemployment, not untrue. And the question is, one of the ways to solve that is to have a far more flexible wage structure.
Well, it is, but I think one of the key points what we're talking about here is partly the symbolism of the high rates of pay going to CEOs. Well, it's not just rates of pay, it's the add-ons and the extras. I mean, although I sympathise with the 1 to 10 ratio, I don't frankly think that's going to be very practical. And in terms of practicalities, there are surely things which government can do. I think Warren Buffett, of all people, is suggesting an across-the-board tax for total remuneration at the top level of 30% on everything. Do you know, people here, if you're on a tax level of I think it's about 600,000, you're paying 40%. So the person earning $1 million a year is paying his tax of 40% at 1 million. If you're paid 20 million, you're also paying 40%. Why not have surtax, for heavens? Then you don't actually have to cut pay. But
already very high.
It's not. Britain has 45%.
Yes,
so
and if you take the United States, if you take the federal and the state taxes,
you can go to their schools and their hospitals after you've paid their tax. Here you don't. You've still got to pay that in over and above.
Really? Not the wealthy don't do that. You know that. I mean, come on. What is really interesting, which is you've touched on, is the social wage, which is a problem.
Yeah.
Yes. No. Isn't the social wage a problem too?
No.
Why not? If people had decent housing and education and health care provided by the state at the lower end, that would also take the pressure off.
No, apparently, actual social wage is an important augmentation of what workers are earning because of the difficulties that they face here. I think, let me also talk to this question that we think that employment alone solves the problem. Employment is critical, and it's very important that we must achieve that. But we have over 60% of South African workers earning less than 3,000 rands per month. So we have to address the majority of workers who are too low.
Can I ask you this?
Because I don't think it's correct.
No, it is correct. In fact, even
what's not correct?
3,000 is too much.
More than 60% earning less than 3,000 rand a month.
Yes. But irrespective, let's not, because I haven't got time. But let's assume that it's a lower wage at entry level. Is that something that, in fact, we should consider at least to get people into the economy?
We should have a general minimum wage across the board that can make people who are working to afford at least a minimum good life.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to continue. I've run out of time. I'm awfully sorry, which in fact is a pity because there's a whole lot of interrelated issues here that we need to talk about. But what we were concentrating on in the main was this discrepancy between, as I think Roger Southall reminded, between the executive pay and what everybody else is getting. We could talk about the other stuff too. But there is something about a country which has the extraordinary inequalities that we do in the context of a debate about inequality, that we don't do something about it, and that in fact the people at the top end don't think very carefully about what the political implications are if we continue with the path that we seem to be rapidly moving towards or in the direction thereof. How do we deal with these questions, both at the top end and at the lower end? Well, you've heard some of the debate this evening. Judge for yourself. Goodbye.
that moves. ENCA.com.